Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with round 3 of the Manufacturers Championship at the Circuit de la Sarthe. You can see we just about started to record this race in time. I totally forgot to do it before the intro sequence, so we're going straight in. We're starting from P7. This was the final race of the day. It was race number 3, top split race, and starting P7 wasn't a brilliant lap in qualifying. 1 minute, 3 minutes 58.0 I think it was. It was about 6 tenths slower than what we did in split 2. Now in split 2, race 2, we were in a 4th, 5th position going into the final lap. 6th position going into the final lap, and there was a lot of chaos that happened in front of us. But I made a mistake on the curb, spun out, got on the power on the curb with the right hand tyre, and it just spun me out into the wall. So if you were watching the stream, you would have seen that. So in this race, final opportunity to get some solid points. It's all about just trying to make progress from 7th and see if we can get ourselves into the top 5 really. You can see a car already up front has got a penalty. We all know at this track the penalties are so easy to pick up. I mean, it is a little bit too exaggerated again now, although I think I'd prefer it like this than having the really loose settings. As you see there, I run a little bit wide on the outside. I took too early apex. I knew I was going to get a half-second penalty there, but I've got the slipstream of the Mercedes in front of me, and we've got Jonas behind me. So what I was thinking was, get past that Mercedes, then once my penalty's gone, I should be able to tuck back into the Jaguar's slipstream when we're on the straight where the penalty's only, so I shouldn't lose too much really, especially with the Ford GT's straight line speed. So you see they're going into the braking zone. The penalty zone is just up here. You can see another car has got the penalty there, which is a bit frustrating, because if I didn't pick up that penalty there, at this point we could have been looking at picking the slipstream off the car in front, getting past that and getting past the Corvette as well, and being in a really nice position straight away from the start, and maybe getting close to the slipstream of the leading group. But you can see that little half-second penalty lost me a bit, but like I say, able to tuck back into Jonas's slipstream and not lose a massive amount. So now I've just got to try and concentrate on not making any further mistakes in this race. As you can see, it all gets a little bit chaotic there. 3 cars looking at the same apex pretty much. I didn't know if one car was going to go for a dive, but they all sorted that out, and now I've just got to try and get on the power as early as possible. Very tricky on some of these corners of Ford GT. The rear does want to step out on the curbs and stuff, so just trying to take it nice and easy and trying not to make mistakes. Now this track for me isn't my strongest track. It's never been a track that I've particularly excelled at, so we're in an okay position for myself really. I didn't expect to get a really big scoring round at this track, because it's never really been a strong track. As Jonas there, a little bit late on the brakes and actually nudges into RC Spider, and then if you keep an eye on RC Spider in front of Jonas, he brake checks him there. Look at that. That's a little bit naughty. I mean, what Jonas did was, it was a little bit aggressive, but he didn't mean it. I think it was just a mistake on the brakes. But that brake check is not what we want to see in FIA races, especially in top split. I'd be a bit annoyed if I was Jonas at that, but that gives me the position, and I gave obviously Carl Williams a little bump draft, and then we just got back past him on the straight. Now we're ahead of that Mercedes. One thing we do know about that Mercedes, we had a practice race, and Carl Williams was in there, and that Mercedes in the slipstream is so fast in the slipstream. It's not very good outside of a slipstream, but once it picks up the slipstream, it just absolutely flies. You'll keep an eye on the mirror and you'll see how it accelerates towards the Ford GT. Now, just to put it in perspective, the Porsche is only a little bit slower than the Mercedes down the straight, and that Porsche cannot do that. That Mercedes is just such a strong car when in the slipstream. As you see, he's starting to bump draft me now already, and we're going to start getting them SR downs. Just keep an eye on them all the way through the race. Something that Polyphony do need to look at is the way they sort these penalties out, the SR downs out, because really it shouldn't be the car in front that's getting the SR down when the car in front's just driving in a straight line. But you can see there, looking at the replay camera, it looks amazing as usual. This track looks particularly good, especially on these settings at this time of day. As we go into the final sector, now this final sector, again, losing a little bit of time in the Ford GT. I don't know if it was a Ford GT or particularly it could have been my style through here, I don't know, but on this final chicane I didn't feel confident in it. It just felt like it was always going to run wide, and we were losing maybe a tenth or two, but luckily we did it okay that lap. But you can see Carl Williams behind me just about staying in slipstream there. He's going to be able to, as long as he's within half a second, he's fine to pick up a really strong draft from the Ford GT. But now again, trying to be very careful through this section. This is where it's so easy to pick up a penalty by just taking too much off the apex or running fractionally wide, and then just trying to make sure I break it early. I always like to break it a little bit early there to get it to bite into that apex nice and early, and then on the throttle nice and early, and just be careful that rear. You see the rear started to step out there, just about saved it. And now again, this is the trickiest corner, I think, for not picking up a penalty in the Ford GT. Some cars I did notice had a much stronger front end when chucking it in there. It could have been something to do with the gearing, but the Ford GT really did struggle. But just have a little look in the mirror as you're going to see that Mercedes picking up a massive toe, and just look how aggressively he actually picks it up, and he's actually able to bump draft me quite well in that Mercedes. You can see a big whack from behind, and you're going to see the SR down come up in a bit there. We've got another SR down. Now this is going to be quite a common thing in this race, but I kind of didn't mind him doing it because I knew that this was going to take a lot of SR off me, and I really wasn't bothered, to be honest, because as long as it didn't affect my DR, I just really wanted to get into the slipstream of the Corvette in front of me, and obviously the PR1 driver. So if we could just get into the range, you can see we're just outside at the moment. We're about 2 seconds behind, and then every time he bump drafts me, we get back into about 1.8. I don't know if they were doing a similar tactic of bump drafting. It certainly did look like it, because at certain stages they were just randomly, they seem to be pulling away again. So through the corners they were probably a little bit stronger. Like I say, this track isn't my strongest in terms of overall speed, but to be fair, I'm quite happy at being in the position I'm in at the moment in P5, top split race, and it's a solid performance so far. We've only got, this race isn't particularly long. It was a little bit disappointing it was only 4 laps. It would have been nice if it was 5 laps. I think it would have made it just a little bit more entertaining, that extra lap. 4 laps was just a little bit too short in my personal opinion. As you can see, more of them SR downs coming into factor there as we go through the really tight hairpin. Get a really good exit off there. That was quite nicely done. But again, you can see we're just staying around 2 seconds. Now, what you'll notice is that by lap 1 we were pretty much 6 seconds behind the lead battle because of the way the starts work at this track. The rolling start is not really that optimized. You end up being pretty much a second behind each car all the way to the front. So off the start we were over 6 seconds behind the lead straight away. So I think the top 3 cars normally pull away a gap, or the top 2 cars normally pull away out of the slipstream range of P3 or something like that, because it's obviously not a manual rolling start, and it's something I would like to see incorporated into GT, is some form of manual rolling start like iRacing. I'm sure we've got the ability to do it if there's rules there, if they do some sort of system to penalise anyone that tries to take advantage of it. If anyone goes too early they get a penalty. I'm sure it could be done, and it would make these starts, I think it would make it a lot more entertaining, especially for viewers, if you've got everyone side by side going into that final corner, and then the leader determines when the race starts. It would make it much more fun in my personal opinion. As we go through the really fast flowing section, now this is a section where you really need to be really committed. You can see that Carl Williams behind me is staying with us through the slipstream. We've got Jomis right behind that Mercedes as well. Now Jomis wasn't able to really pull a move off on the Mercedes because that Mercedes was so strong in the slipstream, and then he was bump drafting me and picking up more of a slipstream as he boosts my speed. So for Jomis, he was getting benefits anyway because he's just picking up a permanent slipstream, but for myself it was benefiting me slightly. Like, obviously I think if I would have had a car in front of me as well, that would have been a massive benefit, and we would have been able to gain. If we would have had the slipstream, we would have gained some serious time, but we had no car to gain the slipstream off while bump drafting. But again, if we had the slipstream, I don't think that Mercedes would have been able to bump draft us as we now start lap 3 of this 4-lap race, and we're still in a solid position. You can see we're just not really gaining anything on that battle in front. It looks like they're either doing something similar or they're just slipstreaming each other, and it doesn't seem to be, we're not gaining much. But as you can see there, P3 has actually picked up a penalty on that very tricky first chicane. So he's going to have a penalty to take on the second straight just after the chicane. And where will he come out after that penalty? It'll be interesting to see. It looks like it's just a half-second penalty. Obviously, they seem to have lowered the amount that you get for these penalties, which I think kind of fair enough. They did used to be up to 2 seconds for one little minor mistake like that. It seems they've dropped that down to half a second. It does cost you, but it's not a massive amount if you can get back into the slipstream. As you see again, we're going to get a massive SR down again there. But like I say, I knew this was happening. I had no problem with it because I felt like it was the only way we had a chance of a top 3. You can see Grasser in P2 fighting for the win in this race. Obviously in the other Ford GT, I think Grasser's just a little bit stronger at this track than I am. So I don't think it would have mattered what car I was in for this track. I think I was in probably one of the best cars for this track, if I'm honest, the Ford GT. I think the Mustang would have been slightly better, but I can't really complain at the car because the car was solid here. It's just the fact that I wasn't really the strongest at this track. As you can see again, getting that bump draft, and you can see we're actually gaining a little bit now. We're so close to that car in front of us. Just took that penalty, 1.5 seconds. It's tantalisingly close. We just need to get, you know, if they make a little mistake, we're going to pick that slipstream up, and it could be a massive help for us in this race as we now try and get on the power. You see how the rear just wants to step out every time we get on the power coming out of some of these chicanes. But again, you can see Jonas just holding on there in the slipstream. He's got another car behind him. Also Jonas, if you have a little look on that top right hand corner as we go through into the very tricky braking zone. Now this braking zone is very tricky, and I do look again, look how amazing this looks on the replay cameras on Gran Turismo. It almost looks lifelike as we go into the braking zone with that Mercedes right behind us, trying to trail brake all the way in and get on the power as early as possible and carry as much speed through the exit. But you can see the car in front has actually got a penalty now, and this is going to be really good because this might give me the chance of picking up the slipstream from that Corvette, as he has to take his penalty in the next zone, which is just further around. Just as we go through these few corners, it's just in front of us. So he's going to drop back a slight amount, maybe half. I think it's half-second penalty, so he's going to obviously fall back just a little bit and probably just into the reach of our slipstream. But you can see he made that overtake there. He obviously knows he needs to try and get as far ahead as possible so that he can still pick up the slipstream after he's took the penalty. Now, one thing about this penalty zone is it doesn't seem to have that much of a time loss because you're only going slow when you go into it. You can see there straight away off pretty much, and he's back on the power and he just tucks back into the slipstream. So I don't think that, I think that zone is definitely better to get the penalty through this zone than the other zone, because it didn't seem to give him a massive amount of time loss there, and we're just getting in the slipstream. You can see there just about picking up the slipstream with the Corvette as we go through the long right hand corner here now, trying to get on the power as early as possible. Now what you've got to pay attention again is with the Ford GT. Now one of the negative things with this car is obviously the tyre wear is a little bit stronger than some of the other cars. It's not so great on tyres. You can see the rear tyres, even though we were running -5 bias in this race, so all the way to the front to save the rear tyres are starting to wear out slightly, and that is just going to obviously get worse and worse. The more they wear out, the more you slide, the more they wear again. So through this section you'll see the rear needle went there, just about saved it. You can see on the steering wheel inputs there as we go through there, I had to really give it a bit of opposite lock there just to try and save it, and we lose that vital slipstream. You can see it was just maybe a tenth or two that I lost just through that little moment of oversteer, but that's now lost me the slipstream to P4 again. So again, we're so close, and it's just one of them. You really just want to be within half a second so you don't lose it through a little mistake like that, as we really push the limits through there and just about get it spot on. But the car in front, again, that Corvette picking up another penalty. This shows you just how tricky this track is. I don't think I've seen a race without multiple penalties from multiple cars, because it's just so tricky. And I've actually done a reasonable job in this race at not getting a penalty when having to be on it quite. I had to really be pushing, and if you have a little look, we've actually, with the strategy we run, we run a little bit wide there, but just about keep it in the limits. You can see I did get nervous because I brought it right over to the right hand side really aggressively, but we did it fast enough and got away without any penalty there. But we started this race over 6 seconds behind the leader, I think it was, or 5-6 seconds, and we're actually now 4.3. So with the bump drafting that the Mercedes is doing us, it is actually getting us closer to that lead battle, but we haven't got enough laps. So I think this is, I really wish this lap was that extra, this race was that extra lap long. Would have made it a little bit more interesting. Maybe reduce the fuel rate down, maybe reduce the tyre wear down by 1 or 2 or something as well, and it would have made it a flat out race still, but with the same type of tyres kicking in on that final lap, as that Corvette has to take that penalty, and he's lost it out on now in this race. You can see he's going to be dropping down 2-3 places, something like that. But the PR1 driver in front of us, 1.7, 1.8 seconds ahead, but Carl Williams is giving me that bump draft, so I'm waving goodbye to my SR. I knew this was going to happen as we get into the braking zone, trying to brake late. He had a little look up the inside there. I think it might have been more of a defensive look up the inside just to make sure Jonas didn't go for a move on him, and maybe he was a little bit worried. If Jonas did go for a move on him, I think Jonas would have been able to actually get past him in the slipstream, because that Jaguar is a much stronger car down the straight than the Mercedes. But again, getting the bump draft. So Carl Williams doing quite a tactical race, although I think they do need to do something about this, because GT3 cars should not be bump drafting. Let's be honest, it doesn't happen in real life because you'd be wrecking the car. Maybe they need to do some sort of maybe if they do something to the penalty system to make sure, you know, something there to sway people away. They need to let people know what they've done, so that that you don't go into a race after an update and it just randomly does it, because we know what they're like. The developers, they don't tend to give us much information on what they change with the penalty system. It would be nice to get a clear understanding of things they alter, so we know what they're altering, but never seems to work that way. As we now get extremely close to P3's slipstream, you can see 1 second. We just need that, just a couple attempts more, but through these corners it's a little bit stronger, especially with the tyre wear kicking in on this Ford now. And this final corner, I really had to try and get good traction. You can see Force is going to obviously try and get really aggressive on the powers. We get on the power nicely there and actually get fairly good traction from the Ford GT, considering that tyre wear is is starting to actually have quite a big factor now. But he's going to pick up that slipstream, and just look how strong that Mercedes is when in the slipstream. It's crazy how fast it gets in the slipstream. However, when he pulls out the slipstream, he's going to struggle, but he's got enough of his car up the inside, and I kind of just let that go. I felt he has helped me out in the race slightly, so I'm just going to tuck in behind him and just try and cover off Jonas now. So I had to be quite tactical how I let him go there and tuck back into that Mercedes. Maybe I should have fought it and held the inside line and went for the P4, but to be honest, this track was never going to be a strong round for me, so I think there'll be rounds when I can get a much stronger points in this. So hopefully by the end of the 20 races, this round won't even count, because we've got the Nürburgring, which I'm hoping will be quite a high scoring round for me in the Ford GT. It's quite a strong car there, and I'm quite a strong driver there, so we'll see how that goes as we go into the final few corners. Just trying to make sure we don't get a penalty, don't run wide on the gravel there, and go over the line, and we come away with a very solid P5. Now that is much better than what after the races we had previously. We wasn't going to race this race, but luckily the missus let me do the final race, so we have to say a massive thank you to her. We pick up a P5 with quite an entertaining drive. Obviously I would have liked more overtaking in it, but it was just that little bit short of getting the slipstream to the car in front, and we come away with a solid P5. You can see we only finished 4 seconds behind the leading group, so we was making progress in that race. But I think if we would have had another car in there in the mix to be able to give us the slipstream, and then for Carl Williams to bump draft and to have the slipstream, we might have been able to get onto the back of that lead battle. It would have been interesting, but we come away very happy, to be honest. Like I say, not a strong track for myself. 2,260 points, not amazing points, but it's still better than nothing. Obviously, started from P7 and getting ourselves to P5. It's the main thing, we gain places. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. We're going to be back with the Group 1 race there that we had there. We did actually manage to record one of them. I think it was the first slot that we entered. It was probably the better, most enjoyable race. We didn't pick up any massive points in that again, but it was quite an enjoyable race. So I'll be uploading that hopefully tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up if you did. I do appreciate it. And make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and click that notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone.